by Mike Bennett.
So a lot to get to this morning. A lot happening out there. Hurricane Sandy, obviously our top story. We're going to get right to it here. 2 people have been killed, one in Haiti, one in Jamaica and Florida. Already feeling the impacts today with watches and warnings extending along the Florida coastline and into southeast Georgia. Sandy has also forced flight cancellations to airports to close in the Bahamas and in Jamaica.
We have live team coverage of Hurricane Sandy from our meteorologist in the field to our global forecast center here in Atlanta, including our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker.
We're going to talk with Carl here in just a second, but first we're going to get to Mike Seidel. He's in Singer Island, Florida this morning. Mike, what exactly do you think will happen at least today in Florida? Any cause for concern, especially along the coastline?
Not a huge cause for concern. You know, we're going to have the winds ramping up. We're going to have some rain. As long as you stay out of the water, you should be in fine shape here. Nobody's boarding up. This is more of an alert situation because the peak wind gusts, once you get inland, are going to be maybe 30, 35 miles an hour. You go 15 miles inland, the wind drops off. Now, here on the coast, we may get gusts upwards of over 50 miles an hour later today through tomorrow. Now, behind me, one of those rain bands is trying to rotate in. It's extending inland down to Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. You can see a bit of a shelf appearance to the cloud. Even got a vessel out there, and that is heading into port. We had a cruise ship earlier and a marine ship. Now we've got this large, looks like a yacht, larger than Bettis's boat, I'm sure, and that it's trying to get in, but they're bobbing up and down pretty good out there with this surf. Meanwhile, on the radar, you can see the rainfall again just south of here. And look how it's arcing in, those brighter colors. So we're going to get some pretty good rains here. We've had one good dousing, and a few minutes ago we had about a 2-minute shower, just enough to put my hood up. But the bottom line is, what kind of impacts are we going to see on the east coast of Florida? Here at Singer Island, same goes for Miami up to the Palm Beaches. We're going to have winds increasing. Gusts this afternoon, 35 miles an hour. Tonight and tomorrow, winds could gust over 50 miles an hour. More substantial, more law-provoking rain, flood-provoking rain tonight and tomorrow. We may have some quick urban flooding, but as far as coastal flooding, we'll watch that. Minor coastal flooding at high tide. Next high tide's dinner time tonight, and the beach erosion along with the rip current. So a couple of days where you need to stay out of the water, at least till Saturday, if not Sunday, Carl Parker. And then after that, we just watch and wait and see where this thing ends up northeast. One thing for sure, if I'm out on the coast covering this in the northeast early next week, I'll have more than this on. It's about 80 degrees here, and I'm thinking when that storm hits the northeast, it's going to be more like a rain 55, a very annoying situation.
Yeah, Mike, we're going to be talking about those impacts along the coast for a couple of days there in Florida, and exactly right. We're going to get some rain and some gusty wind, but it's not going to be a terrible situation there in Florida. We do think that there is potential for a terrible situation in the northeast, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So right now we're looking at a Category 2 storm, 105-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving north at 18 miles per hour, and here is a look at the peripheral effects that are already getting into Florida. We're getting some heavier rain now and some gusty wind in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, Miami there. And this is the model depiction of how this is going to go over the next 24 hours or so. You see these strong northeast winds driving down into the coast, and they'll lift up and along the coast through the day tomorrow, gusting to 50 and maybe in some cases 60 miles per hour, certainly churning up that surf, and then finally begins to relent on Saturday. So here's the forecast track from the storm. Be coming through the Bahamas today. Very strong winds now in the southeasternmost islands, including Long Island and Cat Island. And then as it lifts up, it's going to make a right turn. The models are in good agreement about that. And then beyond that, makes a left turn, but we're not exactly sure about where that left turn is going to occur. And that's going to have a huge impact in terms of how many people are affected. Now, here, first of all, is the U.S. GFS model. This is the American model. And the most recent run of this model shows the storm moving up fairly far to the north before it makes that left turn. Now, we would still see quite a bit of wind and quite an impact there across a lot of the northeast, but not nearly what we would see in this scenario. This is the European model, very reliable performer historically, and this model brings the center of the storm into the mid-Atlantic coast on Monday, and I'll zoom in and detail some of the impacts. So on Sunday, if it were to happen this way, we'd see very strong winds developing in the eastern part of the Carolinas, and then going into Monday, we watch the core of the storm start to move in. You're talking about a huge area of strong winds, and there are many, many trees that still have their leaves in the mid-Atlantic region, so that increases the surface area and increases the likelihood that they'll come down. So we could be talking about potentially millions of people without power in this scenario. And then on top of that, you'd see a very long flow onshore, which would pile up the water, pile up the waves, do tremendous damage along the coastline in this scenario. And then on top of that, we would see this windstorm continue through the day on Monday, finally begin to settle a bit into Tuesday, but very heavy rain then moving into the Appalachians. So this is, potentially one of the worst storms that we've seen in this region if it were to happen this way. So we can hope that it moves up farther northward and more up towards the Maritimes, but there could potentially be tens of millions of people affected by this storm. That's back to you.
Carl, thank you.
It's hard to see how we could escape the strong winds from this here regardless of track. Well, coming up, we're going to talk more about the anniversary of the perfect storm.